Thank you, everyone, for joining me week after week for these live internet studies. My name is Ariel Ben Lyman Hanavi, and we're in segment 1, which is the Matthew 9:14 through 17 study. Let's just jump right into the study. As you can see on my screen, we're about ready to take a look at a quote from Pastor John Piper. We're looking at this idea of a parable that Yeshua presented. And there's some terminology in the parable that leads many Christian pastors and Bible teachers to the conclusion or interpretation that Yeshua is suggesting that Judaism is really on its way out as a religion or as a way of approaching God, a lifestyle, and that Jesus is introducing something new. So that's why we're talking about replacement theology. We've already talked about the introduction in replacement theology in previous studies, so go back and listen to those teachings that I provided for you on my website and on my YouTube channel. But let's jump into the study where I've got my highlight parked right now. Here's what I say in my own study. This is kind of a backtrack of last week. Near the end of his short sermon, Pastor John Piper, that's who we're going to be looking at, he made the following applications for his particular church. And this is based on his understanding of these particular verses. Now, the verses in question are the Matthew 9:14 through 17, which we read earlier. Maybe I'll reference them once again in this particular study. Keep in mind that this parable that Yeshua teaches in Matthew is also found in Mark and in Luke, I believe. I think it's absent from John if memory serves. So it's not found in all of the 4 Gospels. And of the 3, I think Luke is the one that gives us the most detail if you were to, say, compare them all side by side. But nevertheless, for Pastor John Piper's quote here, what I did is I bracketed in his in the quotation to indicate which topic is being addressed by his explanation, because the parable itself addresses, Yeshua talks about fasting, he talks about a bridegroom, he talks about putting wine into wineskins, and he also talks about sewing patches onto clothing. And so Pastor Piper is going to be going through those types of details. In fact, let me just do this. Let me scroll back up and read the passage real quick. Otherwise, many of you who don't have a Bible handy might not be able to follow along with Pastor Piper's comments. So let me read the verse real quick. The relevant passage is Matthew, for me anyway. Again, this is found in 2 of the other Gospels, so depending on which book you're reading it from, you'll get the general gist of the parable. I do call it a parable. Earlier, I wasn't sure if it was really a parable because in Matthew it doesn't say parable, and in I think Mark also the word parable isn't found, but in Luke the word parable is actually found, so it is a parable. Here's what we have. Then the disciples of John came to him, coming to Yeshua, that is, in verse 14, asking, quote, "Why do we and the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?" Verse 15, and Jesus said to them, the attendants of the bridegroom cannot mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them, can they? Continuing, but the days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and they will fast. Yeshua continues, verse 16, but no one puts a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch pulls away from the garment, and a worse tear results. Curious anecdote, you would have to say from our perspective, but it obviously made sense to the people then who were listening to what he was saying. He continues in verse 17, nor do people put new wine into old wineskins, otherwise the wineskins burst, and the wine pours out, and the wineskins are ruined, but they put new wine into fresh wineskins, and both are preserved. Okay, so we've got this parable. And it's curious. Let's talk about it. Scroll back down to this example from Pastor John Piper and pick up his comments. The first set of comments are going to be addressing the issue of fasting. This is what Pastor Piper has to say. This is so stunning and so glorious and so unexpected in this form that Jesus said that you just can't fast now in the situation. It is too happy and I think there's a typo there, and too spectacularly exhilarating. I'll have to go back and correct that later.